This isn't a story about a broken heart. This is a story about a balance sheet. It's about a 12-line email that erased 15 years of marriage and turned me from a founding partner into collateral damage. My husband thought he took my soul. He was wrong. He just took an executive. What he left behind was an architect, and an architect always knows exactly where the load-bearing walls are. My name is Eliza Reed. I am 42 years old, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of Aurasphere Solutions. On the day my marriage ended, I was not at home. I was in the Denver Command Center 2 floors below ground, running the final systems check for Aurasphere 2.0. This was my project. I had spent 3 years, thousands of hours, building this baby from the first line of code to this final pre-launch simulation. The air smelled like ozone and stale coffee. My team was buzzing, jittery with anticipation. We were 6 hours from the biggest launch of our careers. My husband, Julian, was supposed to be in San Francisco. He was the CEO, the charismatic face of Aurasphere. He was allegedly charming venture capitalists for our Series C funding. A crucial VC meeting, he had called it. I was so deep in the diagnostic reports that I almost missed the notification. It was not a text. It was an email. From him. It was short, 12 lines. Eliza, it began. I have found my truth. Sienna is my soulmate. I need to live authentically. I will be leaving to build something real with her. Do not contact me. Sienna, the 26-year-old brand consultant he had hired 3 months ago, the one who kept using the word synergy in meetings about UI design. Leaving. It was the same cowardly corporate language he used when firing someone. He was not leaving, he was absconding. My team was watching me, waiting for the final go-ahead. I looked at the email again. I did not cry. My first thought, the very first electrical impulse that fired in my brain, was not about 15 years of marriage. It was about the 10K report we had due to the SEC by Friday. I kept my expression neutral. I pulled my personal phone from my pocket and opened our banking app, the joint savings account. It was empty. Drained. Not the business accounts, he was not that stupid, but our personal liquidity. Everything we had saved. The VC meeting was a fabrication. It was a cover story so he could get across state lines before I realized the money was gone. I turned to my lead engineer. Hold the simulation. I need 10 minutes. I walked to the break room. My hands were steady. I brewed a coffee, dark, black. I did not need comfort. I needed fuel. I went to my office. His old laptop was still on my credenza, the one he had replaced last month but had not bothered to wipe. I opened it. It booted up, still logged into his profile. On the desktop was a single file, a presentation deck. Authentic Us, a new lifestyle paradigm. It was all there. A business plan for a new brand with Sienna, vapid, narcissistic, full of hashtags and pictures of them on a beach. And the budget. The budget was funded entirely by the exact amount that was now missing from our joint savings. He had been planning this for months. I sipped the hot, bitter coffee. The shock was not emotional, it was organizational. I finally understood. Julian never saw me. Eliza, his wife. He saw a function. He saw the COO, the organizer, the planner, the person who ran the systems that allowed him to be the visionary. And that function had just been terminated. He had made a critical miscalculation. He thought he was the foundation of the company. He was just the facade. I finished the coffee. The launch simulation could wait. I returned to my office, locked the door, and muted the intercom. My first call was not to a friend or my family. It was to Bria. Bria does not just practice law. She dissects contracts the way a pathologist examines a corpse, looking for the precise cause of death. She answered on the second ring, her voice already sharp. Eliza. I kept my voice flat, devoid of emotion. It was a status report. Julian is gone. He took the joint savings and left with the brand consultant. He sent an email. There was a pause, but it was not for sympathy. It was for calculation. The email, Bria said. her voice dropping into that quiet, dangerous tone she used during depositions. Did he send it from his company account? Yes, I said. And to your company account? Yes. Good, she said. That is official corporate correspondence. It is discoverable. Now, first question. Forget the house. Forget the money. Who controls the intellectual property? A small, cold smile touched my lips. I do. Explain, she commanded. The core algorithm, the engine that runs Aurasphere, is covered by U.S. Patent 94582. It is registered in my name, Eliza Reed. It is licensed to Aurasphere Solutions on a rolling basis. It is not owned by them. Bria actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like a breaking icicle. Oh, Julian, you magnificent fool! This was Julian's ultimate blind spot. He was the showman. He believed the company was the logo, the brand, the mission statement he changed every quarter. He never truly understood the technology beneath his feet. He thought the patent was just another asset of the company, filed away in a cabinet. He never read the licensing agreement I drafted, the one that made me the gatekeeper. He just signed where I told him to. He saw the company as his kingdom, but I owned the land it was built on. My next call was to a number I had not dialed in 3 years. I called Mark, then asked him to conference in David, the original architects. The brilliant, difficult engineers who built the foundation before Julian decided the color of the lobby furniture was more important. We and I must own my part in this had pushed them out during the Series A financing. Julian called them boat anchors to his vision. They had been bitter, but they were smart. They negotiated to keep their shares. Together, they still controlled 15% of Aurasphere. More importantly, they despised Julian Reed's arrogance. Eliza, Mark said, his voice wary. This is a surprise. No pleasantries. Mark, I said. I am calling about the kingdom. The king has just abdicated. He took the treasury and the new court favorite and ran off to build a new castle in the sand. David's voice crackled on the line. What does that mean for us? It means he left the kingdom, I said. But he forgot the keys, the core IP, the patent. It's mine. Aurasphere is just a shell, and it's about to default on its license. I let that sink in. I could hear them processing. I want to offer you a better deal than the old one, I continued. I am not proposing a hostile takeover. That is messy, and the brand is already toxic thanks to him. I am proposing something cleaner. We let Aurasphere die, we let it starve, and we build something new from its bones. Something built on the technology, not the marketing. You are proposing a mutiny, David said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I am proposing an architectural reclamation, I replied. We spoke for an hour. While they pulled up old files, Bria was busy. She called me back while I was still on with Mark and David. I put her on speaker. Eliza, Bria said, are you familiar with the corporate bylaws specifically? Article 7, Section 4. I did not. Which one is that? It is the morality clause, Bria said. The one Julian himself insisted we add 2 years ago after that intern scandal at Apex Industries. He gave a whole speech about how the character of the CEO is the brand. I remembered. The clause stated that any executive officer engaging in personal conduct that brings the company into disrepute or harms the brand's integrity could be subject to a forced buyout vote by the board and majority shareholders. Bria continued. His email, sent from his corporate account to his COO, explicitly detailing his affair and his intention to abandon his post for his soulmate. That is not just a resignation, that is Exhibit A for a Section 7 violation. Mark cackled on the line. He built his own gallows. Yes, he did, I said. Julian's email was not just a breakup note. It was a signed confession. It was the legal trigger we needed. The plan was no longer just a possibility. It was a blueprint. I walked out of my office and back into the command center. The launch was canceled. We have a systems integrity issue, I announced to the room. The murmurs died instantly. The launch is scrubbed. We moved to diagnostics and review. Full stop. I want reports from all team leads on my desk in 1 hour. The next morning, I was at the main Aurasphere office by 7 a.m. The whispers started the moment I walked through the lobby. Julian's polished, glass-walled corner office was dark. He was never late. I called an all-hands meeting for 9 a.m. in the main atrium. The sales team, Julian's loyalists, the ones who loved his expensive dinners and his motivational speeches, were huddled by the espresso machine, looking nervous. The engineers, my people, just looked tired and confused. I stood where Julian always stood, by the large digital wall that usually streamed our stock performance. I had it set to the company logo. I did not raise my voice. I did not pace. "Good morning," I said. My voice was calm, neutral, amplified slightly by the room mic. Julian Reed is on an unexpected, indefinite sabbatical to find his authenticity. A few people gasped. I ignored them. Effective immediately, I will be assuming the role of Interim Chief Executive Officer. In addition to my duties as COO, all project timelines remain in effect. The Aurasphere 2.0 launch is on temporary hold pending a full systems integrity review. That is all. Back to work. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. They had expected tears, or a dramatic story, or panic. I gave them a directive. The Julian loyalists looked horrified. This cold, procedural woman was not the supportive work wife they were used to. They were right to be scared. I did not go to Julian's office. I went to my own, locked the door, and began the real work. I spent the next 72 hours in that building. I did not sleep. I lived on black coffee and the stale protein bars I kept in my desk drawer. This was not panic. It was a meticulous, controlled migration. I was not stealing. I was performing a comprehensive backup of my own work. My employment contract, the one Bria had drafted for me as COO years ago, was ironclad. It explicitly stated that I co-owned all client lists I had personally developed and that my patent predated the company. I began transferring my proprietary research, my development notes, and my entire client contact database onto a series of encrypted solid-state drives. I was separating the signal from the noise. I was taking what was legally and morally mine. While the data transfers ran in the background, I held a series of quiet individual meetings in a third-floor conference room, far from the executive suite. I called in the 5 key engineers, not the managers, the actual builders, the ones who despised Julian's vision meetings that derailed their development cycles. I kept it simple. Julian's new venture is a lifestyle brand. I told each of them, one by one. He is selling his truth. Our business is, and always has been, technology. His new company is built on feelings. Ours is built on mathematics. Decide where you belong. You have 24 hours to make a choice. If you stay, you are staying with him. If you come with me, you will be a founding partner. I did not have to wait 24 hours. All 5 agreed before they left the room. They would give their 2 weeks' notice, citing the leadership instability. On the second day, between data packets, I sold the house. The enormous glass and steel monstrosity in Cherry Creek that Julian had insisted on as a statement of his success. He had never read the property deed. He did not know, or did not care, that I had purchased it using the proceeds from my own premarital assets. The title was solely in my name. The Denver market was hot. I accepted an all-cash offer from an international buyer, set to close in 1 week. On the 3rd morning, the final data transfer completed, and then, precisely at 10 a.m., Julian made his one smart move. A notification popped up on my screen. Access to main server denied, administrator credentials revoked. He had done it. From Bali, or wherever he was with his soulmate, he had remotely locked me out of the main server. He thought he had just cut my throat. He thought he had trapped me, locked me out of the company he believed was his. I smiled. I did not need the main server. I was the server. Julian's network held the buggy, compromised code for Aurasphere 2.0, the real code, The clean, revolutionary source code for what would become version 3.0 was not on his network. It never had been. It was on a sand-colored, offline drive. It had been sitting in the biometric safe in my desk drawer for the past 6 months. I picked up the drive. I put it in my bag alongside the client data and my research. I walked out of my office, past the whispering, nervous sales team, and took the elevator down to the lobby. I did not look back. I got in my car, drove to Denver International, and disappeared without another word. Denver was not just a city anymore. It was a cage. Every street corner held a memory, a reminder of the life I had methodically built and the man who had tried to demolish it. The air was too thin, the sky too crowded with glass towers that all looked like the one I had just abandoned. I did not need to run. I needed to reset. I needed a new foundation. I did not fly to a beach. I did not fly to a predictable tech hub like Austin or Seattle. I flew to Santa Fe. I needed the high desert, the stark clarity, the ancient quiet. I needed a place where the air was clean and the horizon was endless. This was not a vacation, it was an incubation. The proceeds from the house sale were wired into a new account, one Julian had no knowledge of. Within a week, I had formed a new limited liability company, registered in Delaware. I called it Kestrel Technologies. A kestrel is a small, precise falcon. It hovers, it watches, and it is a lethal hunter. Under that name, I purchased a minimalist, modern compound miles outside the city, a collection of low-profile adobe and glass structures that seemed to grow from the red earth. It was secure, isolated, and had a high-speed fiber optic line. It was a fortress of creation. 3 months passed. For Julian, these were 3 months of noise. He was documenting his authentic new life with Sienna all over Instagram. Their feeds were a torrent of performative happiness. #Soulmate, #building, #truth. Pictures of them in Bali. Pictures of them drinking green juice. Pictures of them brainstorming authentic us on whiteboards. He was building a brand about being, while I was quietly building. I was a ghost. I deleted my social media. I changed my number, porting the old one to a burner phone I kept in a drawer. I sent no emails. I made no posts. As far as the Denver tech world was concerned, Eliza Reed had vanished. One by one, they arrived. First Mark, then David, then the 5 key engineers, each having served their 2 weeks' notice at the rapidly imploding Aurasphere. They did not come to Santa Fe as employees. They came as partners. We set up in the main compound building, turning what was supposed to be a living area into a war room. We had whiteboards on every wall, servers humming in a climate-controlled pantry. We were not fixing Aurasphere 2.0. That code was dead, compromised. We were building what I had been designing in secret for the last year. We were building Kestrel. It was Aurasphere 3.0 in all but name. It was 10 times faster, more secure, and used a predictive algorithm that made the old version look like a pocket calculator. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by adrenaline and a shared, unspoken sense of purpose. We were building a cathedral of code in the middle of the desert. Then, one evening, the burner phone in my desk drawer buzzed. It was the first time it had made a sound in months. I picked it up, a text from Julian. "Eliza, I just heard from the bank. You sold the house. You sold our house. What the hell is wrong with you? Where am I supposed to live when I get back?" I looked at the message. The sheer, breathtaking entitlement. The assumption that after he had abandoned me, stolen from me, and publicly humiliated me, his spot in our home was simply waiting for him, as if he were just returning from a business trip. I typed a reply. "That sounds like a you problem. Congratulations on your new life." I sent it and put the phone back in the drawer. He did not get it. He could not. He thought I was just moving furniture. He had no idea I was moving an entire empire, piece by piece, to higher ground. He thought he was the only one who knew how to build. He was about to find out he was not even the best architect in his own marriage. The Kestrel beta was stable. We were running simulations in the Santa Fe data center that were not just beating Aurasphere, they were lapping it. We were ready. I was just waiting for the first crack to appear in Julian's kingdom. It happened 4 months after I left Denver. The burner phone rang. It was not Julian. It was a number I knew by heart, Robert Harrison, the CEO of Transglobal Logistics. Transglobal was not just a client, they were our anchor. Their account represented nearly 30% of Aurasphere's annual revenue, and their entire global system was built on our platform. "Eliza, thank God," he said. His voice, usually so confident and booming, was strained. "I was praying you still had this number. What in God's name is happening over there? Julian is on sabbatical, and he left some glorified sales rep in charge who does not know the difference between a server and a satellite." He was panicked. "Our system is built on Aurasphere 1.0. It is breaking under the new load. The 2.0 upgrade you personally promised us for this quarter is non-existent. The interim CEO keeps sending us marketing pamphlets. We are hemorrhaging money. Eliza, where are you?" I let the silence sit for a beat. I stood, looking out the glass wall of my new office at the stark, red desert. "Robert, I understand your frustration, but Aurasphere Solutions is no longer my concern. I resigned my position." "Eliza, do not do this to me," he pleaded. "We have a 10-year relationship. You built this system for us. You cannot just leave us hanging." "I am not leaving you hanging," I said, my voice cool and precise. "My former company is. However, your timing is fortunate. I am in the final launch stage of a new, independent platform." "What new platform?" he asked. Suspicious. "It is 10 times faster than the upgrade you were promised," I said. "It is more secure, more scalable, and, most importantly, it is 100% backward compatible with your existing 1.0 infrastructure. It is not a patch, Robert. It is a full transplant." There was a heavy pause on his end. "When can we see it?" "I can be in your Chicago headquarters tomorrow at 9 a.m. I said. I flew commercial. I walked into their main boardroom alone, carrying only a slim laptop. The room was full. Robert, his entire C-suite, and his top systems architects. They all looked exhausted and angry. I did not mention Julian. I did not mention Sienna. I did not speak of betrayal or stolen money. I simply plugged my laptop into their projector. "This," I said, "is Kestrel." For 1 hour, I gave them the demo. I showed them the architecture. I showed them the predictive logistics module that would save them millions in fuel costs alone. I showed them the dashboard that fixed every single UI complaint they had lodged for the past 2 years. When I finished, their chief architect, a man who had argued with me for months about API limitations, just stared at the screen. "It solves everything," he muttered. "It fixes all the bottlenecks the 2.0 beta was still having." Robert looked at me. His poker face was back, but I saw the deep relief in his eyes. "What is the proposal, Eliza?" "I will personally oversee a full migration of your entire global system to Kestrel," I said clearly. "The downtime will be negligible. I am offering a full-service contract, effective immediately, at a price point 20% lower than your pending renewal fee with Aurasphere." They asked me to step outside for 10 minutes. It only took 5. When I returned, Robert nodded. "We are in. The contract is yours. Our legal team has one condition. We want a 6-month exclusivity clause. We want this advantage locked down. We will pay a premium for it." This was the moment. I could have become very, very wealthy on that one signature. I smiled. A small, cold smile. "No." Robert looked shocked. "No, Eliza. We are offering you your first and largest client on a silver platter." "And I am accepting," I said. "I value your partnership, but I will not accept exclusivity. I will give you a 6-month head start. I will not approach your direct competitors during that window. After that, Kestrel is open for business." He was baffled. "You are turning down a premium. Why?" I stood and closed my laptop. "Because Robert. Julian thought he could abandon his responsibilities and leave his partners to sink. He was wrong. My technology is for everyone he left behind. You are just the first. I flew back to Santa Fe with the signed contract. Transglobal Logistics was just the first domino. I had a list, my client list. I spent the next month executing a surgical removal of Aurasphere's revenue. I went to the pharmaceutical giant in New Jersey, the private bank in New York, the data analytics firm in Palo Alto. One by one. I showed them Kestrel. One by one. They defected. I was not just winning. I was systematically and legally gutting Aurasphere, leaving nothing behind but an empty shell. The first client migration was a success. The second was even smoother. By the time we were onboarding the third, Kestrel Technologies was operating like a well-oiled machine. My Santa Fe headquarters was a hub of quiet, intense activity. We were building, not talking. And then, the noise started. It began as a trickle, then became a flood. The burner phone, silent for so long, began to light up. Emails, forwarded from my old Aurasphere account by a sympathetic admin, started pouring in. The panic was coming from Denver, but I knew the source was in Bali. Julian was still posting. The hashtags had become more desperate. Hashtag hustle. Hashtag authentic life. Hashtag building an empire. But the photos looked strained. Sienna's smiles were tighter. Vlogging your truth is expensive. The private villas, the organic meals, the influencer collaborations. It was all burning through the cash he had stolen. And he had just discovered his primary ATM was empty. His interim CEO in Denver, the sales guy Julian had promoted, was in full-blown panic. I saw the forwarded email chains. Transglobal has terminated their contract. Pharmatech just sent a cease and desist, citing non-performance. First National Bank is pulling their account. Then, the first voicemail from Julian hit the burner phone. His voice was not charming or level. It was a high-pitched, furious screech. Eliza, what did you do? What did you do? The clients are all leaving. Transglobal is gone. You tanked the company. This is our money, our life. You need to fix this. Call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. You need to fix this. Now. I listened to the message, my expression unchanged. Then I opened my email and sent a reply to his official Aurasphere address, knowing the interim CEO would also see it. I am no longer an employee of Aurasphere Solutions. Please direct all inquiries to your board of directors. My burner phone lit up instantly with a text message. From him. You are my board, you own 40% of the company, this is your problem. I typed my final reply to him. 40% of what? Julian. A company with no proprietary IP and no clients. You are the CEO. You fix it. I blocked his number. The next day, a new message arrived. It was not a text. It was a direct message on Instagram, a platform I had not opened in months, but had not deleted. The request was from an account I recognized. Sienna. I opened it. The message was a wall of rambling, misspelled text. Eliza, please. I know you hate him, but he is a mess. He has no more money. He thought the company would just run itself. He just keeps talking about his company and how you stole it. He is impossible to be around. He is not the man I met. Can you just give him what he wants, whatever it is, so we can have some peace? I just want him to be happy again. I read the message twice, and for the first time, I felt something other than cold calculation. It was a strange, hollow pity, not for him, for her. She was not a mastermind. She was not a villain. She was just another fool. She was a 26-year-old girl who had believed his sales pitch, just like I had at her age. He had sold her a vision of a truth he never possessed. She was just the latest in a long line of investors he had duped, and I was the first. I deleted the message. It was just more noise, and I was busy building. 2 days later, I got a final one-line email from my admin contact in Denver. He is gone. The interim CEO, he just walked out. The office is empty. The ship was not just sinking. The captain had fled. The first mate had fled, and now the rats were fleeing. The throne was officially empty. Julian's authentic Bali adventure ended abruptly when the money ran out. He returned to the United States, not to the Denver mansion he no longer owned, but to a world that was no longer interested in his vision. He was broke, humiliated, and finally, desperate. So he did what all cornered narcissists do. He found a lawyer. I was in the middle of a code review with Mark when a process server delivered the summons to the Santa Fe compound. The lawsuit was thick with baseless, hysterical accusations. Julian was suing me, Eliza Reed, for malicious theft of corporate assets, gross breach of fiduciary duty, and intellectual property theft. He was demanding damages in the tens of millions and, crucially, filing for an immediate injunction to freeze all operations of Kestrel Technologies. I read the entire document, my face impassive. Then I scanned it and emailed it to Bria. She called me 30 seconds later. She was not concerned. She was laughing. It was a deep, satisfied sound. "Eliza," she said, "this is the best news I have had all week. This arrogant idiot just handed us the gun, the bullet, and a signed affidavit explaining how he plans to shoot himself in the foot." "He wants to freeze Kestrel," I said. "He wants to," Bria corrected. "But to get an injunction, he has to prove he has a high likelihood of winning the case. He has to prove the IP is his. And you and I are about to prove, in excruciating public detail, that it is not. He just gave us the legal right to countersue. He just opened the door for discovery. He just paid a filing fee to be legally annihilated." Our response was not just swift, it was brutal. Bria had been preparing it for months, waiting for him to make the first move. Within 48 hours, we filed our countersuit. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression. We did not just deny his claims, we systematically dismantled his entire identity as a CEO. The countersuit was a declaration of war. We cited my personal patent, U.S. Patent 94582, attaching the licensing agreement that proved Orosphere was merely a tenant, not an owner. We cited his official email to me, Exhibit A, as proof of his dereliction of duty and his immediate abandonment of the company. We cited Article 7, Section 4, the morality clause he himself had written, and we attached his Instagram posts from Bali as further proof of his personal conduct that had irreparably harmed the brand. But Bria did not stop there. We included the bank records showing the wire transfer of our joint savings to an account he had opened for Authentic Us. We included his text messages. "I need to be free. I need to live authentically. You handle the company." Then came the move that was pure Bria, the final surgical strike. Our countersuit officially named Sienna, his 26-year-old soulmate, as a co-conspirator. We were not just suing Julian, we were suing them both for conspiracy to defraud Orosphere Solutions by knowingly receiving and commingling stolen assets, the money he had taken for their joint personal venture. Sienna was served at the cheap Los Angeles apartment they were renting. She was no longer a protected soulmate. She was a named defendant in a multi-million-dollar federal lawsuit. The fallout was immediate. Sienna was a creature of social media, of image and brand. She had built a following of 1 million people based on her authentic lifestyle. Being named in a fraud case was not part of that brand. She panicked. She did not call a lawyer. She did what she always did. She went live on Instagram. It was a 40-minute tell-all video, filmed on her phone in her car. She was sobbing, mascara running down her face. It was the performance of a lifetime. She was the victim. He had lied to her. He was toxic. He was a narcissist who had trapped her. He had ruined her life and dragged her into his mess. She claimed he had no money, that he had tricked her, and that she was leaving him immediately to find her own truth. She kept her 1 million followers. She gained sympathy. She cut her losses. And in doing so, she publicly confirmed every allegation in our countersuit. She destroyed Julian's last shred of credibility, love, for the entire world to see. He was left with nothing, No company, no soulmate, no money, no house. He had only the lawsuit he had started and the countersuit that was about to consume him. It had been 8 months since the email, 8 months to the day. In that time, Julian's world had collapsed. His lawsuit against me, the one based on bluster and arrogance, had been summarily dismissed by a federal judge. It was deemed vexatious and without merit. My countersuit, however, was very much active. It hung over him, a pending date with financial execution. Sienna was gone, her tearful Instagram video having successfully rebranded her as his victim. Julian was a social and professional pariah. Bria's investigator had confirmed he was living in a short-term furnished rental in Burbank, driving a car leased by the week. He was, in every measurable sense, broken. Kestrel Technologies, meanwhile, was closing its Series A round of funding. We were solvent, successful, and hiring. But one piece of business remained. The corpse of Aurasphere Solutions was still technically breathing, and I owned 40% of it. It was time to pull the plug. As majority shareholders, my 40% combined with Mark and David's 15%, we had the legal right to force a final reckoning. Bria's office, acting as corporate counsel for the majority stakeholders, sent out a single formal notice for an emergency shareholder meeting of Aurasphere Solutions. As a shareholder, Julian was legally required to be notified. His response was almost immediate, sent not to Bria, but to my old corporate email address, the one he had locked me out of, which I now controlled again. "I will not let you do this," he wrote. "This is a farce. I am still the CEO, and this company is mine. I will see you in court." He was still playing a game he had already lost. He did not understand that we were already in court, and he was the one on trial. Bria's reply, sent to both him and his increasingly desperate-sounding lawyer, was a model of cold, legal formality. "Mr. Reed, thank you for your email. We respectfully note your objection. Your presence is not mandatory for a quorum. However, you are welcome to attend the meeting, at which the first order of business will be a binding vote for your formal removal as CEO and director, citing Article 7, Section 4 of the corporate bylaws. Please be advised that shareholders representing 55% of all voting shares have already motioned to vote aye. The meeting will proceed as scheduled." We set the location. It was not my new headquarters in Santa Fe. It was not Bria's sterile law office. It was the main glass-walled conference room on the executive floor of the old Aurasphere building in Denver. The lease was in default, and the power was scheduled to be cut off at the end of the month. But Bria had arranged for 2 hours of access, a symbolic graveyard. He had no choice but to show up. His lawyer must have told him that failure to appear would be seen as further abandonment. But I knew Julian. He still believed, even now, that he could win. He thought he could walk into that room, deploy the famous charisma that had built the company, and charm Mark and David. He thought he could appeal to my history, to our shared past. He thought he could talk his way out of the consequences. He did not understand the nature of the meeting. He thought he was coming to fight over the scraps, to negotiate a small settlement for his 45% of a bankrupt company. He was walking into the final trap. I was not there to liquidate. I was there to acquire. The only asset of value Aurasphere had left was the name itself, the trademark. It was worthless to him. But in my possession, it was a loose end I could bury. My countersuit had claims on all his assets, including his shares. He was walking into a room where he had no power, to face a majority he could not sway, to negotiate a deal where his only option was total surrender. I flew in from Santa Fe that morning. I was not the woman who had fled 8 months prior. That woman was operating on adrenaline and instinct. This woman was operating on a 9-figure valuation and a certainty as cold and hard as steel. I arrived at the Aurasphere building before anyone else. The digital directory in the lobby was dark. The marble floor was dusty. A temporary security guard sat at the main desk, reading a magazine. He did not look up. Bria, Mark, and David arrived together. We said nothing. We took the elevator up to the executive floor. The elevator doors opened onto a cavern of shadows. The expansive, open-plan office that had once buzzed with over 100 employees was a graveyard. The carpets were stained where the desks had been. Network cables hung from the ceiling panels like dead vines. The only light came from the emergency exit signs and the gray Denver sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The air was heavy with the smell of stale coffee, old air conditioning, and dust. We walked to the main conference room, the one with the panoramic glass wall facing the mountains. Bria's paralegal had set up a single long table and 5 chairs. At the head of the table, a large digital display was plugged into a battery pack. It was currently dark. We sat. We waited. At 10 a.m. on the dot, the elevator doors opened again. Julian appeared. He had lost weight. The expensive, custom-tailored suit he wore hung on him, as if it belonged to a larger, more confident man. His visionary glow was gone, replaced by a sallow, hunted look. He had tried to tame his hair, but it looked brittle. He stopped dead when he saw the empty office. He looked around, his confusion palpable. He walked slowly, his footsteps echoing on the concrete, past the empty space where his glass office had been. He looked lost, a ghost haunting his own past. He saw us in the conference room. He straightened his jacket, a pathetic attempt to reclaim his old authority. He walked in. He did not know who to look at first. His eyes darted from Mark to David, who stared back at him with undisguised contempt. He looked at Bria, who was busy reviewing a document. Finally, his eyes landed on me. I looked, as he had once said, like $1,000,000, but I was not his million. I was my own 200 million. I was wearing a tailored dress the color of steel, my hair was perfect, and my gaze was steady. "Julian," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." He did not sit. He gestured wildly at the empty room, his voice raspy. "Where is everyone? What happened? What happened to my office?" "The furniture," I asked, feigning confusion. "It was liquidated. The landlord seized the assets to help cover the lease termination fees after the company defaulted." "Defaulted?" he sputtered. "I did not default on anything." "You did," I said. "When you abandoned your post. Please, sit. We have a full agenda." He looked at his lawyer, who looked just as lost, and then he slowly, stiffly, took the seat at the far end of the table. "As you know," Bria began, "the first motion is for the formal removal of Julian Reed as CEO." "You cannot do this," Julian interrupted, slamming his hand on the table. "This is my company. I built this. You all worked for me." Mark leaned forward. "No, Julian, we worked for the code. You just talked, and then you left." "I did not leave," he shouted. "I was on a sabbatical. I was entitled to a sabbatical. A sabbatical is a planned leave of absence." "Julian," I said, my voice still quiet, "it is approved. It is not a 12-line email from Bali. It is not emptying the bank accounts. You cannot prove I abandoned anything," he yelled. "It is my word against yours." I looked at him. I did not blink. "Actually, Julian, we can—" I tapped a key on my laptop. The large display at the end of the room flickered to life. It was not a PowerPoint slide. It was not a financial report. It was security camera footage. The timestamp was from 8 months ago, the day before he sent his email. The angle was from the main office, pointed directly at his desk. The footage showed Julian, in the evening, when the office was empty. It showed him meticulously, calmly, clearing his desk. He was not just tidying up. He was packing. He was boxing up his personal photos, his awards. He was wiping his drawers clean. He was taking the expensive espresso machine he had always claimed was for the team. He was preparing his escape. He stared at the screen, his mouth open. The color drained from his face. It was undeniable. Time-stamped proof of his premeditated, deliberate abandonment of the company he claimed to love. "That," I said to the silent room, "is Exhibit B." The day you decided to leave. You just forgot to tell anyone but Sienna. The security footage clicked off, plunging the screen back into darkness. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Julian's short, ragged breaths. He looked at his lawyer, who was pale and shuffling his papers, clearly blindsided. I leaned forward. The meeting will now come to order. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the dead air. First agenda item, a motion to vote on the immediate removal of Julian Reed from the position of Chief Executive Officer and from the Board of Directors for cause, as specified under Article 7, Section 4 of the Corporate Bylaws, dereliction of duty and actions bringing the company into disrepute. All in favor! I raised my hand. Mark raised his. David raised his. The motion passes, I said, my voice flat. Julian Reed is officially removed as an officer of this company. You cannot do this, he finally shrieked, finding his voice. This is my company. I built it. I built this. Mark, who had been silent, finally spoke. His voice was gravelly with a contempt he had held in for years. It stopped being your company when you decided authenticity was a better business model than business. You built the logo, Julian, we built the engine, and you just tried to drive it off a cliff. I held up a hand. Second agenda item, a motion to dissolve Aurasphere Solutions. Effective immediately, all remaining assets are to be liquidated to pay outstanding debts to creditors. Bria spoke for the first time, her voice crisp and formal, as if reading from a script. As Kestrel Technologies is the company's largest secured creditor due to the catastrophic breach of the core IP licensing agreement triggered by the CEO's abandonment, Kestrel will, in lieu of payment, absorb all remaining tangible and intangible assets, including the corporate name, trademarks, and all remaining server hardware. Julian's head snapped between me and Bria. The legal language was confusing him, but the tone was not. What does that mean? What does that mean for me? What do I get? I own 45%. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it down the long, polished table. It stopped directly in front of him. This is the final valuation, prepared by our forensic accountants. Your 45% of the shares, after factoring in the massive debts you incurred, the broken leases, the severance payouts, and the damages from the IP breach, is worthless. In fact, you are personally liable to the corporation for $80,000. He stared at the number. $80,000. He did not have $80. The fight vanished. The arrogance, the bluster. It all evaporated, leaving a hollow, terrified shell of a man. He looked at me. His eyes were red. He was trying to cry. Eliza, please, he whispered. Liza, look at me. She was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. I was an idiot, a complete fool. You and me. We built this. Together. Let me come back. Please. I will do anything. I will. I will be a consultant. For Kestrel. I can help with sales, with the vision. I stood up. Bria, Mark, and David stood with me. I looked down at the man who had called his 26-year-old mistress his soulmate. The man who had set fire to 15 years of our life for an Instagram lifestyle. Julian, I said, and my voice was not angry. It was just final. Kestrel Technologies just closed its Series A funding round at a $200 million valuation. We are not hiring consultants who specialize in authenticity. We are hiring architects. I picked up my briefcase. And you. You are not an architect. You are just a ghost. I turned and walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking on the concrete. Mark and David followed me. We did not look back. We left him alone in the empty, dark, silent room, with nothing but a worthless piece of paper and the view of the mountains he used to think he owned. Thank you for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, and let's connect. Be sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.